Today I'm going to share with you 5 of the top questions that people ask me about this project. So if you have other questions, feel free to let me know, but these are some that I get asked often by different people. So one of the first ones would be, are you living in your house right now? No, I am not living here. I'm very thankful that I'm not living here. You could live in it, but it would not be very pleasant. So no, I am not living here currently. So when I purchased this house, it's been just over 4 years. In June, it was 4 years. Before purchasing it, one of the things that I processed through was how long this restoration project would take. And at that point, I thought it would probably take 3 to 5 years. And I feel like that's kind of on track. Now, will I be living here full time by next June? I don't know. That's maybe not quite realistic. Every summer I think, oh, maybe by this fall I'll be living there. Well, you know, it's good to have hopes and dreams, but realistically, it's just a huge project and it takes time. And because I'm doing a lot of the work myself, it takes more time. Let's see, another question that I get asked often is, how do you know what needs to be done? That's a really good question. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes there are parts of this that I don't know what needs to be done. But that is one advantage to having been working on the house for a longer period of time, through conversations that I have with people who have experience either renovating homes or in construction, or I got to talk to an architect last summer. Sharing pieces of my project with different people has helped me to recognize certain things that need to be done. And then also on the flip side, things that don't need to be done, things that I thought I had to do, but now I've realized actually that's probably optional, or that's one way to do it, but not necessary. I think sometimes what people mean when they ask this question too, how do you know what needs to be done, is, do you know what you're doing? Like, how do you know what to do or how to do it? And, you know, some of that, I think there is some knowledge, I have some knowledge, and some of it's kind of like once you start doing it, it makes more sense and you can figure it out as you go. I can be a pretty hands-on learner, and while I'm not super mathematical or mechanical, I do have more of a mechanical type mind. I can kind of see how things work and take it from there. So I think some of it is being willing to mess up, or also just to try and not be afraid of the process. So some things that I've known from the beginning, like that need to be done, there's not a working bathroom, there's not a working kitchen. The plumbing had all been torn out of the house before I bought it. It had probably copper pipes, and someone had come in and taken it all out, you know, vandalized the property. So like those things I knew had to be done. And then pieces of it slowly come together. Well, can I live here without taking it down to the studs? And originally, like I knew I needed to rewire the whole house, you know, redo the electrical. And so originally my hope was to only take down the lath and plaster and be left with the wood boards like you see behind me. But the more I processed that wasn't a very good solution. For one, it was going to be more difficult in a way to only take off the bottom so many boards to run the electrical, the wiring. And then as I thought about it, well, then insulating. How do you insulate? And I had thought, well, I could do blown-in insulation. Well, if you do blown-in insulation, it gets complicated. It's an old house. So basically old houses weren't built to be completely airtight. So if you see behind me here, this is the exterior of the house right here. You know, in a new house, you would have some kind of waterproofing here before you put your insulation in. Well, my house doesn't have that. So if I was to put in blown-in insulation without putting some kind of waterproofing in, and my insulation gets wet, well, that causes mold and mildew and eventually rots the wood or causes other problems. So I realized I couldn't do blown-in insulation. So then what? So really it came down to taking everything off the walls to insulate properly. I still was thinking just batt insulation, fiberglass batt, that pink fluffy stuff that you generally see. And then this winter I was having a conversation with a friend who built his house, I think about 20 years ago, with his brothers and some other people. And in this conversation of trying to troubleshoot my house, he's like, well, have you thought about spray foam insulation? And I was like, well, I've thought about it, but you know, I know it's more expensive and I don't know if it's really necessary. And he said, well, the spray foam should act as a, sorry, just lost it. It would waterproof as well as insulate. Because of the type of material it is, it's going to seal any crack that it gets into, so there wouldn't be moisture coming through it into the house. And I was like, oh, okay. So there's like piece after piece after piece that kind of build on each other. So as I began to wrap my mind around that, then I realized that I don't have to reside my house, because I thought I would need to reside my house to make it waterproof from the outside. So there's like all these pieces that as you go along, I'm learning and figuring it out. So did I know all of this? Do I know every step that I need to take to make the house livable and comfortable? No, but am I learning? Yes, and hopefully in the right order. Hopefully I figured the things out before I do them, instead of taking steps and doing things and then realizing I did it wrong. So that is the risk I run as an amateur doing my own house. I'm not a professional. I haven't been trained in construction techniques and such. So, but I come back to this because I love history, and the people that built my house were probably not professional house builders either. Maybe they had helped build some houses, but it's very possible they were just building their own home and following plans and working with some people who maybe had more experience than them, but might not have been their profession. So I don't know, hopefully that answers that question of how do you know what to do. It's kind of take it one day, 1 month, 1 year at a time, and try and learn as I go and pay attention and yeah, troubleshoot things. So that's another question. Let's see. Another one would be, has restoring a home always been a dream of yours? And I would definitely say no. It was never like on my radar, that like my bucket list or something that, oh yeah, someday I want to restore a home. I don't think that ever was kind of on my radar. But I have always loved old homes. And I think for a long time I've had a dream of living in a small little white house, which is what my house is. And actually, even in my daydreams, it might have even been a smaller house. So in that way, but I never pictured needing to do all the work that I'm doing. I kind of pictured an little old house that someone had lived in continuously and a grandma owned it and I bought it, not taking something and stripping it down and doing all the work. So that has not been a dream of mine, which kind of takes me to another question of what made you think you could take on a project like this? For one, maybe I'm a little crazy. I didn't know it before, but it's not a normal thing for people to do, or not a lot of people. There are plenty of people who do it, but it's not the norm. And yes, it was somewhat crazy. But I did weigh all the particulars, and kind of like I said earlier, like the length of time to get into the house. But back to the question, what made me think that I could take on such a huge project? So there's a few things that really contributed to this, I think, that made me feel like this was something I could do, even though it's something I've never done. One of those is I've had some experiences on missions trips, both as a student in high school and then as a leader when I was out of college. So when I was in high school, my junior year, my church went to Mexico, to Juarez, to build houses. And we built 3 small houses. I'm trying to think what the dimensions of them were. Maybe like 12 by 20. So they weren't teeny tiny, but they were small houses. And in 5 days' time, we poured a slab, put up sidewalls, stuccoed, ran electric, put in windows, put on the roof. I mean, it was crazy. All the things that we did. And was I probably 17, 16 still? Yeah, probably not quite 17. To be paired with another gal on the trip and given instructions on how to run the wiring to run electrical, and just seeing how straightforward it was, especially just someone walking you through it. Now, I realize that running electrical for a house built on a dump in Mexico is different than running electrical for a house in the US. But experiences like that, I think, made me realize like some of the things that sometimes we think are so complicated are not as complicated as we make them. So that's one piece. And then when I was in college, or out of college and helping with youth, working on some restoration projects out in the Appalachian region of the US, and just seeing homes that were in disrepair, and working with a crew leader who has some training in construction with a team of students to put a house back together, you know, repair things that seemed kind of major to me. So those are 2 pieces. I think another thing that made me think I could take this on was I've done some really small rewiring projects for my parents. I've always liked doing DIY project kind of things. Good at researching how to do things, even if I haven't done them, or, you know, they seem intimidating. And then probably the last one that maybe a lot of you can connect with is watching HGTV and some of the remodeling, restoration type house shows. You know, we all got hooked on Fixer Upper, you know, what was that, like a decade ago? And so watching those shows, though, I think was really helpful, because you see sometimes the amount of disrepair that homes can be in and still be saved. So, which is not quite the same as doing it yourself, but knowing that that's possible. That's part of what made me think I could take on such a big project. And then I think one of the other pieces to taking on this project, well, I guess 2 pieces. For one, I don't have small children. So, and I have a place to live right now that I don't have to be out of in a certain time. So a lot of people that look at taking on an old house, they need to move in like 3 months, 6 months from now. Like, they don't have a big window of time that they can afford to work on the project over years. You know, they want to be in quickly. So doing it yourself is not really an option for them. But for me, it was. And so that's a big piece of it. And in the same way, taking on a project like this, like, I don't have a lot of financial debts and things that were kind of hanging over me. So it gives me more freedom in my schedule to be able to save money and work on projects as I go, and not work a 40-hour work week that leaves me very little time for working on the house. Although I did do that for some of the time owning the house, which is part of the reason that I'm not as far along as I'd like to be. That did slow down my progress. So yeah, I think those are some of the pieces that made it a viable option for me to do this. And kind of along that vein, just to kind of follow up on that, a lot of you probably don't know, my personal friends that I've talked to a lot about my house, especially when I was going to buy it, would know this, but when I looked at buying the house, I had different people come and check it out with me before I bought it. And I had one friend in particular that came and looked at it who had flipped an old house that didn't need as much work as mine does, but still needed a fair amount of work. And he did it to flip it and sell it. And after looking at it, he said, you know, if you are going to do 75, 80%, 90% of this work yourself, then you might come out with a house that is worth what you put into it. But if you were to hire people to do everything that needs to be done, your house would cost so much more than it would be worth in the end. And so that's one thing I've really had to balance, is that this is definitely my project. This is not me hiring out people to do everything. Otherwise, I'll wind up kind of upside down on a house, you know, having put way more money into it than I could ever get back out of it, kind of thing. So I knew that going into it. And so that's why this project takes a long time. So if you see, you know, if it seems slow to you, it seems slow to me as well. But I'm okay with that. Like I knew that was part of the whole process. So let's see, the last question, I think that's the last one. Yep. One of the last ones that I get asked is, do you work on your house in the winter? Or are you going to be working on it in the winter? The answer is no, I have not been working on it in the winter. I think the latest that I've been in the house is probably November, December. For those of you that don't know, I live in northern Minnesota. And so after that November, December, you know, we get cold weather in December. You know, it's freezing, we have snow. We can get down to 0, but you know, daytime temps are more around freezing, you know, 30, 32 degrees. Sometimes warmer, sometimes colder. But after December into January, February, March is like our coldest season. And it just is not practical to be here in the house. For one, I would have to keep the driveway plowed. I don't have electric in the house, so keeping it warm, I don't have electric for lighting. So you'd have to have battery operated, you need to have heaters, and honestly, I just haven't kept the momentum going into the winter and had it set up so that I can keep moving forward. It is doable. There's plenty of contractors who do construction throughout the winter in Minnesota. I guess I'm just not that tough. But this year, I am very hopeful that I will be able to continue into the winter. I am trying to keep pushing right now to move forward with some major projects. One of which would be getting it insulated. So if I can get insulation put in before the winter months, kind of get into full swing, that would make a huge impact on being able to continue working in the house over the winter. So we'll see how that goes, but you know, it's kind of one of those, even when I'm not working on it physically, there's a lot of behind the scenes figuring and planning and trying to work out details. So even if I'm not doing physical labor in the house, there is a lot going on behind the scenes. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up the main questions that I get asked. But like I said, if you have other questions, things that you wonder, feel free to comment in the video here and let me know what those are. And sometime I'll make another video and answer other questions. But yeah, it's a fun project, and I know sometimes it's probably hard for other people to wrap their head around like the why are you doing this? And so some of these questions help answer that. But I think sometime you can look for a video from me just explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing. Some of it, like I said, is answered here. There's pieces of it here, but not the full answer probably. So thanks for watching. As always, if you enjoy watching my videos, seeing what I'm doing, subscribe to my channel, like my video, and share it with your friends. Okay, thanks guys.